Good morning, everyone. I'm glad I was able to get you all out of the bed early and rolling. There are donuts in the back and coffee. Oh, somebody took the donuts and coffee. I'm sorry. Yeah. So bad. We're going to start with Nancy Guy, Delegate Guy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My bill is 1491, and I'm going to start out by asking that it be amended to strike the last line, starting with the principal. Anybody who knows me, and all of my colleagues will come to know that as a former locally elected school board member, there's nothing I hate more than unfunded mandates, and I've been made to realize that the training cost of this would constitute, however slightly, such a mandate. So I ask that that line be stricken. The rest of the bill is pretty self-explanatory. I do believe that we all are in agreement that we need to do everything in our power to encourage the civic education and engagement of our young people. So what this would do would take that to its most practical conclusion by requiring that public high schools who become of voting age are provided with the forms and information about voter registration at the time they turn 18.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt the line amendment? Is there a second? Second. There's a motion and a second to adopt the line amendment. All those in favor express by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Thank you. Any questions for the patron from the committee? Thank you. Any individuals here this morning to speak in favor of this legislation?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Kathy Birch with the Virginia Education Association. We have a long history of supporting bills to make voter registration access easy for our students. We appreciate Delegate Guy bringing it this session and also including the availability during the school day for students to fill it out. We urge you to support the bill.
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, delegates. Carol Naga with the League of Women Voters. So yes, we certainly support measures to increase voter registration in the high schools. We're very active in that respect, but we also take education to them when we do the registration. But it would be great if every school had a policy and a program to make it happen. Thank you.
Any individuals here to speak in opposition of this legislation? Members, any questions for the patron? Delegate Guy, do you have any remarks?
Sir. Delegate Bagby.
Delegate Van Valkenburg.
I have a motion.
Delegate Van Valkenburg.
Move to report.
There's a motion and a second. There's a motion and a second to report as amended. In a moment, we will vote. Members, record your votes. The bill reports 5-2. We will see you in full.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much. Josh Cole.
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Delegate Cole.
Mayor speaking in for HB 762. My bill, HB 762, would essentially expand local control over the Child Services Act funds and provide for the expansion of public school education, special education services, and allow me to explain why this is necessary. By allowing localities to expand the current programs they offer in public schools to students with special needs and disabilities, it's been shown to reduce the financial burden on both the localities and the families who utilize CSA. We've seen that this is true through a pilot program that we have in Stafford County. To give an example, a student in Fredericksburg City has a specific special need, But due to limitations placed on special education programs in the public school system, this particular student has to be bused down to Richmond to have their needs met. Disregarding the fact that in Stafford County, the next locality over, we have a public day school that could meet their needs, but due to the current limitations on the program, this student will not be able to attend the closer school. By passing this bill, we save the state money and prevent students from having to travel longer distances. And we know there is a solution to this problem because in Stafford County, we have piloted this program. And we are essentially hindering the solution to a problem we already know how to solve. By not amending the Child Services Act, we continue to create an unnecessary problem. And at this time, I yield to Julia Holmes, who can further explain and answer any questions you might have.
Good morning, Julia Hammond on behalf of Stafford County.
Good morning.
You've seen this bill in nearly identical form in the past. Delegate Thomas, and a similar version, Delegate Dickey Bell carried. Stafford County has a public day program. It does really well, but unfortunately we're constrained as we do not, the students in that program require more services than we can fund under what we get per pupil. What it costs us is less, though, than what they would be charged through CSA to have them bused to a school further away. It's not perfect for every student. It does not change the way it is determined whether a student goes to a public day program or to the private. It does nothing to the IEP process. All we're asking for, and we can show our numbers too to show that we are more cost effective for some students, we would like to get that difference out of CSA to pay the cost so we can expand our public day program for the appropriate students and hopefully be able to teach those within our planning district closer to home and keep them from having to be on buses for longer distances or quite possibly be in programs that aren't quite the right fit because we can't afford to do them in Stafford.
Thank you so much. Members, any questions for the patron? Thank you. Any individuals here to speak in support? Man, how did you pull this off?
Tom Smith, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, with the Superintendent's Association. We're in strong support of this bill. Having been around these tables for long enough, I sat on the first state management team back in the 90s, representing special ed. And so this goes to the intent, actually, of the CSA in that serving children as close to home as possible and trying to keep them from going to private placements. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Jeremy Bennett with the Virginia Association of Counties. We're in strong support of this bill. We support enhancing the ability of our localities to have flexibility over this issue and to serve children in their own communities. So thank you for the interest in the bill.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Mike Asip. I represent the Virginia Council of Administrators of Special Education, and we support this bill because it does provide our localities that flexibility of having another stream of funding to support our students in less restrictive environments. So we do support the bill. We do appreciate the appropriate placement of students in private schools as needed, but this flexibility will allow us less restrictive environments for our students. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Eldon James on behalf of the localities of Planning District 16, but also of Planning District 9 to the west. All of our localities support this option, the ability to run a pilot, to see how a program can work to help the parents and the children stay closer to home, to have that option. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Jessica Ackerman with the Virginia Municipal League. I, along with my colleagues, support this bill. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Stacey Haney with the Virginia School Board Association. We also support the bill. The way the law currently works, to some extent, disincentivizes school divisions from developing these really great and innovative programs to serve some of our highest need students, and so those students are often educated in private settings. What this bill does is puts the incentive back on school divisions when they can to develop these programs to serve these students in their home communities, and so it's a really good bill that we would ask that you act favorably on.
Any individuals here to speak in opposition of this legislation? You're lonely this morning.
That's all right. You're here to keep me company. Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, I'm Bill Elwood representing the Virginia Association of Independent Specialized Education Facilities. These are the private schools that do serve these children through the CSA. We appreciate the work that Delegate Cole is trying to do, and also the work that Stafford County does. But even on this scale, this would be a significant policy change that would allow a specific public school system to tap into the sum sufficient state pool of CSA funds that has already been set aside to fund the educational services for children that it's already been determined that they can't be served in the public schools. And this is set aside to serve them in a private setting. It's a complex issue that involves intertwined funding streams and jurisdictional authorities, as well as federal and state special education laws. And this bill would open up the system to significant potential fiscal impact. This issue is currently the subject of 2 ongoing studies by JLARC, one on the CSA and one on special education. And we feel that until this objective and thorough review is complete, you should be careful in making changes that could significantly impact the future and the funding of the CSA. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any additional questions for the patron? Delegate Cole? Oh, I'm sorry. Delegate McQuinn? Delegate Cole?
That's all that I have today, Mr. Chairman. I hope
Delegate
it would be a
McQuinn?
pleasure for y'all to report this to full committee.
Mr. Chair, I move to report.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Second. There's a motion and a second to report. Members will record their votes. Excuse me. That motion is to report and refer. And there's a second. Members will record their vote. Bill reports 8-0. I don't think we need to see you in full on this one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Bill, very similar. Delegate McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. Appreciate you not allowing this bill to be heard today instead of Monday, so that some of the folks that are here could be here. So thank you for that. The House Bill 49 is the implementation of a pilot program to study the effectiveness of transitioning certain students with disability from private placement to the appropriately structured public school setting. As was mentioned, similar to the bill we just heard, the entire goal and objective is to improve the opportunities that we have for our most needy of children. This is not about bypassing the IEP process. This is not about limiting parental choice. It is not about eliminating private day school placements when that is the best way to serve our students. House Bill 49 would act to ultimately increase parental choice for families with children with disabilities by identifying the service and capacity needs and allowing CSA funds to pay for a quality education, whether delivered in a public school or a private day school setting. The placement decision still rests with the parent and the IEP team. For several years, I've listened to experts from my local school system who believed and still do that some, not all, but some of our students can be better served in a modified public school setting. They express frustration and the difficulty in transitioning students back to the public school setting once they've been in a private day school setting. They worried that once a child enters the private day school environment, that child it'll be impossible to bring them back to the public school setting so that they can experience the joys and the successes and failures that all the other public school the students might experience. Many educators, some here today, have expressed similar thoughts. This bill simply tries a pilot, 2 to 8 locations. We've heard one location before us, and there's several others that have a strong need as well, or have expressed a strong interest. At the end of year 2 and year 4, the outcomes and challenges will be evaluated, and the reports that are created will become valuable input to see if this expansion of choice was beneficial and can be expanded throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. There is a budget amendment of $88,000 to cover the cost of the evaluation for the Department of Education. However, while the cost of delivery was not an impetus for this bill, if the pilots are successful, the cost to the Commonwealth of delivering these services will drop significantly from the cost of providing day school placement. I think we heard that before at the presentation of the last bill. The cost of private day school placement has increased in the Commonwealth from $122 million to $185 million in the last 4 years. This is a tremendous opportunity to not only lower costs, but more importantly, improve outcomes and give parents and our most severely needy of children more choice. Delegate Adams, Delegate Josh Cole, in addition to myself, have school systems that would like to try to do better than what we can do today. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I know there's some people here to speak.
Members of the committee, any questions for the patron? Any individuals here to speak in support? And if you all could make those comments as full and brief as possible.
Mr. Chairman, Stacey Haney on behalf of the Virginia School Board Association. So the last bill dealt just with planning District 16. We already know that Stafford is implementing a program like this successfully. What this bill would do would give some other school divisions the opportunity to develop these type of very good programs to serve these high-need students. And so we would urge that you also support this legislation.
Chairman Tom Smith, School Superintendents Association. Sorry, it's early. Again, we're in support of this process. To be very frank, we would like to see it statewide. And when we can show that through these pilots, then hopefully we can go to the next step. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Eldon James, on behalf of Roanoke County and Augusta County, we both support this option to test this program, as has been mentioned by others. It's an opportunity to give parents and children the chance to stay in their community if they so choose. It's the way the program used to be run years ago. We'd like the opportunity to show that it can be done and done right. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Allison Thurman, and I live in Hanover County. I'm here to speak about the need to include all students with and without disabilities in general education classrooms in a student's closest neighborhood school. 40 years of research has shown that students with disabilities in inclusive classrooms show academic gains in a number of areas, including improved performance on standardized tests, mastery of IEP goals, grades, on-task behavior, and motivation to learn. So let me share with you what it personally means for my son to be included. It means being provided the grade level curriculum in the same classroom with his former Scout troop members. It means going to the grocery store and the neighborhood pool and him knowing them and them knowing him, and acceptance of exactly who he is and his support needs. So please support inclusion. So now Alex is going to speak. You can just bear with me for a second. So Alex spelled these words. Let's see, sorry. All right, you ready? You want to speak?
As I am here today to speak about what inclusion means to me. I am included in all general education classes and believe classmates expect weaknesses all the time. Because I am included, they can see I am determined and exactly like them. For the question, Alex, if you were in a documentary, what would it be called and what would it be about? My answer was, couldn't happen to a nicer guy. The story of Alex's hard battle to have equality. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
Alex, you're looking good, by the way. If I could fit that blazer, it'll be all mine.
There you go. He writes that before he comes, and he does an incredible job, and he is included in his school. Tanya Milling, the Executive Director at the ARC of Virginia, we strongly support this bill. This bill is key to ensuring families have the option to have their child educated in their neighborhood school. This bill does not, as I already said, prevent parents from selecting private day school or whatever is best for their child, but the current system incentivizes placing students in the most restrictive environment, as that's the only way to get the additional funding. With multiple areas taking part in this pilot across the state, we think that would be wonderful information as they continue the JLARC study. It would pair very well together, so we hope you support this bill. Thank you.
Good morning again. Mike Asif with the Virginia Council of Administrators. We're with Alex. We support this bill so that it provides quality services for students in public schools. Again, those students that need private education receive it. This transition process also is being studied. It has some rigor to it, so we do appreciate that effort on the part of the sponsor.
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Jeremy Bennett with the Virginia Association of Counties. For the reasons stated by the previous speakers and on the previous bill, we support it.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Janet Arison with the Virginia Municipal League. We do support this bill. This goes back to the beginnings of CSA, which used to be called the Comprehensive Services Act, about educating and keeping children, serving children in their communities, and trying to keep them from, placing them out of their communities for services that children do better. This way it's better for their families, and we hope you will support this bill. Thank you.
Members of the committee, I'm sorry. Any individuals here to speak in opposition? I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Elwood representing Virginia Association of Independent Specialized Education Facilities. The same statements I just made to you before. JLARC is right in the middle of looking at this issue, and I'd recommend you take the same action that you took on Delegate Cole's bill.
Thank you so much. Members of the committee, any additional questions?
Delegate Bagby.
Delegate Van Valkenburg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make a note that I think we're probably going to end up passing and referring this to appropriations as we did with the last bill. And I know that we did it the prior year as well with Delegate Thomas's bill. And so I would just say that while we might have a favorable hearing here, I fear, you then have to go upstairs where things tend to die a quick and unseen death. And I guess I would make the challenge to everybody that's in here that this seems to be an issue. If stakeholders could get together in the off season to figure out how we could make this work financially, because it does seem to be an issue and it does seem to be a place where something is needed. And so I would just request that be done if it doesn't get through the budget process, because otherwise we'll be back here again next year doing the same process. And I find that to be a little frustrating. And so I think if we could try to move forward and figure out a way to make this work because it seems like it's needed, I just want to throw that out there publicly and challenge everybody to do that if we get it through here, but it doesn't get through the budget process. And I'll make a motion if nobody has a comment.
Delegate Avoli.
No comment.
Delegate Van Valkenburg.
I would move to report and refer to appropriations.
There's a motion and a second to report and refer. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second to report and refer. Members will record their votes. On an 8-0 vote, the bill is reported and referred to appropriations. Thank you, Delegate.
Thank you.
The next we will have the gentleman from Hanover. I thought both of you would get up because I actually would like if you would go first. We have two identical bills, 1557 and 1578.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And
members of the committee, I spoke with Delegate Wyatt, and he's
yes,
would like to just incorporate his bill into mine if that's appropriate. And
yes, is there a motion to incorporate 1578 into 1557?
So moved.
There's a motion and a second to incorporate 1578 into 1557. All those in favor express by saying aye. Those opposed? Delegate?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I had a meeting with, like I guess most everybody does, with their local governments before we come down here, and Hanover County was interested in making some changes to how we provide our school board members with a pay increase. And of course, as we all know, in Virginia we have appointed school boards and we have elected school boards, and they both had two different ways to do it. And so the county gave me a couple of options, and after I looked at them, I think I picked the cleanest and the most seamless way to move forward, and that's just to put the appointed in, the same posture as the elected school boards, and that's essentially what the bill does. And and I've reached out with VACO and VML and schools. I haven't. People I've talked to have been supportive of the bill. I have Mr. Valentino here from the Hanover County Public Schools. If anybody has any questions for him, but that's essentially what the bill does, Mr. Chairman.
Members, any questions for the patron or his guests? Any individuals here to speak briefly in support of this legislation? You gonna let him speak, buddy?
Mr. Chairman, Tony Valentino with Hanover County Public Schools. We're in support of this legislation.
Thank you so much. Any individuals here to speak in opposition? Either of you have anything else?
Just
I think he does.
Excuse me? Oh, Scott, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. And yes, it's been since 2006 since the Hanover County School Board received or voted on an increase for that. And they did approach us prior to session in reference to this. And the only other appointed school board in the Richmond region, their salary is set at $3,600 annually. They actually passed a resolution in November of 2019 to ask for an increase for their salary. So it makes sense to send it back to the locality. They vote on their annual budget, which then at school board and then goes to the Board of Supervisors, which I served in. So we respectfully ask you to support and it passes. Thank you.
Delegate Cole?
Yeah, so would this legislation allow the appointed school board to set their own salary?
No, it did just. I think the local government still has the authority, but it just puts the appointed school boards in the same posture, the same process as the elected school boards. This is the way I read the bill, doesn't it? Yeah, so it still would come back to the Board of Supervisors because you can't, local school boards don't have taxing authority or any of those kinds of things.
Yeah, so piggybacking off of Delegate Cole's question, am I correct that the school board would include their salary increase in the overall budget, and that would be approved just like any other budget by the
yes, that would be correct.
So in effect, they would be like many other school districts
Yeah, well,
already
it's
do.
basically just like all the other, which is the overwhelming
But to
majority
be
of
clear, they
elected
would
school
be-
boards do. That's correct.
Delegate Van Valkenburg? Okay. All right. We Chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to report
There's a motion
and refer.
to report and refer. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second to report and refer. Members will record their votes.
Why is this going to appropriations?
The bill reports and refers to appropriations on a 7-1 vote.
I thank the chairman and the committee. Thank you.
Delegate Simon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I have House Bill 145, which is a bill that would have the Department of Education develop and make available to school boards model policies concerning the treatment of transgender students in public elementary and secondary schools, to address common issues regarding transgender students, and to make that policy based on evidence-based best practices and include information, guidance, and procedures for the school board. So essentially, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, what this bill seeks to do is to try and standardize for school boards and create a policy that everybody has to turn to and look at for what are the current best practices, what does the science say is the best way to treat students that are transgendered, identified different than their gender at birth, and what can we do to make their educational experience as positive as possible for them and for their classmates. I think it's really important that we give school boards this tool and administrators and so forth to understand what can be a difficult issue and an issue that they're not always familiar with. And so by again, providing this model policy, making sure that it's evidence-based, making sure that we use the best and latest in science and social science to understand how we can meet these students' needs. It's good for the students because they know that they'll receive consistent treatment from year to year. We hear stories of students that work very hard at an elementary school level with teachers and administrators and faculty to get the right accommodations in place, set up a policy that's good for everybody. Then they move to a different grade and they have to start all over with another teacher, or they move to a different school, a new administration, and they're starting from scratch because there's no common baseline from which everybody operates. And so, again, what this bill would do is to have the state board create the model policy, then requires the localities after some time to adopt that policy or their own policy as long as it incorporates the best practices and can go a little further, but it can't go below the standard set by the state board.
Thank you. Members of the committee, any questions for the patron? Any individuals here to speak in support of this legislation? Oh, excuse me.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the...
I'm sorry, Delegate Rasul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question, a friendly question for the patron. We were just wondering...
I appreciate that.
That, can you tell us what the line is between, should this potentially apply to all students in elementary and secondary, or is there a particular legal reason why we limit it to just public school students? Well, I very much commend what we're doing here. Just wanted to get your feedback on that.
Well, so the department, it's really for the school boards. So it's for our public school boards to adopt the policies. The policy is set up for our school boards, and certainly we could create criteria and other for accreditation for private schools and things like that. But that's not what this bill quite reaches to at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is John Taylor. I'm a resident of North Chesterfield, and I'm a parent of a transgender non-binary student who does not feel safe in the current environment and so is being homeschooled. So I come before you very much in favor of this bill that would, help to support transgender students throughout the state in a way that is even throughout the state, like the gentleman was just talking about. There's often a case where a school or a teacher can be in support, and then others who are not aware and are not able to support. So this bill would help to do that. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Ted Lewis. I serve as Executive Director of Side by Side, the largest and oldest LGBTQ youth organization in Virginia. We're very much in support of this bill and feel that it would do a great deal of good for transgender kids across the Commonwealth. A study that was done in 2018 found that using a transgender student's chosen name consistently at school reduces suicide risk by 67%. That is the type of policy that this would create within our Department of Education. It would use that science that is backed up by peer-reviewed research to ensure that there's consistent policies across the Commonwealth. We regularly work with schools that consistently ask us how can they best support transgender students. And while we're happy to provide that guidance, we feel it should come from the experts at the Department of Education. We ask that you please support HB 145. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, good morning. My name is V. Lamnick, and I'm the Executive Director of Equality Virginia. As has been mentioned, we know that transgender students face discrimination and harassment and bullying in public schools. We also know that having LGBTQ policies in place help to reduce that bullying and harassment, which leads to students feeling safer in school, which then leads to higher attendance and better academic performance. So we ask you to please support this bill. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee. My name is Alison Crichton-Price, and I'm a resident of Henrico County. To be trans is to be vulnerable. When I was looking for a way to start helping out in my community, I looked for people who were the most vulnerable, and on that basis started helping out at Side by Side in Richmond and He, She, Z, and We. Working and living alongside trans people and trans children has been an incredibly rewarding experience because I feel like I'm helping people who most often lack the love and support that all humans deserve. My help, however, has been so little compared to what you can do by approving this bill. So if you care about children who are vulnerable and you want to make them just a little bit safer without making anybody else less safe, you should vote in favor of this bill. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Kathy Bircher with the Virginia Education Association. These policies and protections are one of our top legislative priorities at the VEA, and we ask you to support the bill.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Trolin Seward with Virginia Academy of School Psychologists, and we're in strong support of this bill, and we appreciate the statewide implementation part of it. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Lilla Wise. I represent the Falls Church City Schools, and our school board does support this bill.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Todd Gackey with the Family Foundation. We're here in opposition to the bill.
Any individuals here in opposition of this
Sorry.
legislation?
We have some real concerns about this, the impact it's going to have on parents, students, teachers, administrators, the impact it's going to have on religious liberty, the ability to speak freely. But I wanted to point out some specifics in the proposed bill, in particular the fact that there's no definition of transgender. I think we all know that this term is used in public. We use it frequently, but in this code there is no definition of transgender, and so we would be relying on the Department of Education and possibly some outside groups to help define this term. And I think if we're going to establish policies for schools to follow, there should be something in the Code of Virginia that defines what this term is. I also want to point to you on line 22, the use of the word identification. What is this, and how will it be enforced? We can think of individuals like Peter Verlamming, who was a teacher in West Point, who did not use certain pronouns. He was compelled to use a certain type of speech. So would this be something used to compel teachers to speak in certain ways, or students for that matter? Also in line 25, we have school facilities. In Hanover County right now, we're experiencing an issue where a biological male is using a girl's locker room to change. How will this bill impact the use of school facilities by one gender using the locker room of the opposite sex? Finally, I wanted to touch on athletics. I know that the bill includes in their athletics. As you know, there's cases popping up all over the place where biological males are now competing on all-female athletic teams. I think even if you were to take this term out, it still could fall under activities. And since the bill allows for schools to come up with their own policies, to expand these policies, is quite likely that it could still impact athletics. And we already know of a case, I've mentioned this yesterday in another committee, where two biological males are competing on an all-female track team in Connecticut. And are doing quite well. Now these female athletes, a few of them have filed a complaint, a Title IX complaint. So we're seeing all of these issues pop up, and I think that we also have to take in consideration that schools are addressing these issues. And we can't create policies that for Abington, say Virginia, which is going to be handling these issues differently than, say, in Fairfax. And also I want to point out, I have an article here on Jamie Shoup, who was the first non-binary person, a biological male, who was transitioning into a female, taking the medical treatments to make this happen, and then eventually left that lifestyle, and has some criticisms about that process. And I think that it goes to show that this is not a settled area. There medical professionals that are still discussing this issue, and I don't think that we should be putting policies in place and requiring school boards to develop these policies when they're still grappling with this issue. This is still best left for the communities to address, and for those reasons, we oppose this legislation. Thank you.
Additional individuals that wish to speak in opposition. The gentleman took most of your time, so if you would just say your name and
Eddie Ayler,
briefly
Virginia Assembly of
express your
Independent Baptists,
opposition.
speaking on behalf of private Christian schools, which we believe should not be included in any way, shape, or form. And I'm concerned that was related. So I would like to be sure that, of course, for those that are in public school, that they too still have the protections that they need for their own personal opinions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. Tom Antorcio, Virginia Catholic Conference, and we oppose this bill. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Members, any questions for the patron?
Mr. Chair?
Is Delegate Avoli.
Question for you. Holistically, I support the concept. Why not leave this up to the local school boards? And again, coming from local government, these are elected officials who represent the community here. And again, holistically, I do support the concept. I do have grave concerns of, again, coming from the state level onto the local school boards that should have the autonomy to make those decisions.
So I thank the gentleman for the question, Mr. Chairman. I would tell the gentleman that I think this is an issue where some things are, I think, best left to local option, but this is something that cries out for consistency across the board. And I think it's a place also where there is a lot of evidence-based social science out there, but having the resources to access all that and the expertise may be beyond the scope of some of these school boards. And so this is a tool that will be made available to all these school boards. Again, they do have some autonomy to go beyond sort of the minimum standards that this policy would set, but this is really designed to be a tool to get some base level of consistency. I would say, for instance, that the West Point case is actually a case in point for, I think, why this bill is necessary. I do think that it's important that folks understand how harmful it is to students when you misgender them intentionally and when you use their improper name. And I think all students all across the Commonwealth are entitled to a certain level of dignity and safety when they come to school. So I think, while I'm a big believer in local autonomy on school boards, this is an issue where we have to establish a baseline that everybody can work off of.
Chair, entertain the motion. Chair will entertain the motion.
Move to report.
There's a motion and a second to report. Members will record their vote. Bill report 6-2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. Thank you, everyone who came out so early in the morning.
Thank you. Delegate Runyon.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee and staff. I'll be brief. This is speaking to House Bill 134, individual education plans, guidelines for developmentally disabled individuals in our community. It's a family life education program that's designed, it's parent chosen. Parents have to choose to opt in to develop and maintain safe and healthy relationships both while in school and throughout the rest of their lives. It protects folks with developmental disabilities from sexual assault, abuse, now and later, as I spoke to. It helps them understand their rights, learn about welcome and unwelcome touch, gain skills to express themselves regarding unwanted advances from others. It helps them have an understanding of social norms, excuse me. And I think one of the most important things in talking to various constituents about this, it is parent-driven. And so it is operates within the existing IEP program, and the parents choose to participate in this. ARC of Virginia is in full support of this bill, and I do have folks from the ARC and other organizations that would like to speak to it. If that's
Members
your
of the
pleasure.
committee, any questions for the patron? Individuals here to speak in support, and I'm going to have to limit the group to 2 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Brian Kelmar. I'm chairman of a national organization called LRID, Legal Reform for People with Intellectual and Developmentally Disabled People. I'm based here in Richmond. I have a son who has autism. Several years ago, my son with autism experienced a situation that we had never, ever expected. He found himself in circumstances that because of his disability and lack of information and education in this area regarding appropriate behaviors, he had no understanding of the situation. The incident led to a court case that has since destroyed his life. The event has destroyed all of his chances for success and especially his loss of hope for life. It's what we call a civil death. Unfortunately, we found out my family isn't alone. A few years back when I was asked to tell a story about my son on a national webinar, the webinar typically would get 100 to 150 people. Ours had over 1,000 before the internet crashed. It was overwhelmingly an issue. We realized this much. It was a big problem, and our organization was formed. We have since grown to represent hundreds of families here in Virginia and numerous families throughout all 50 states. This education bill gives these children a chance in life to learn appropriate behaviors that can help prevent getting caught up in the criminal justice system and feeding the school-to-prison pipeline. People with developmental disabilities like autism are 7 times more likely to get caught up in the criminal justice system and up to 3 times more likely to be victims because of their lack of education. This bill also protects them from being victims, where they are also, as I mentioned, higher risk because they don't understand the situations. I want to leave you with another story. Unfortunately, one of the parents could not be here. Her name is Linda.
And I'm sorry, sir, but
yeah, cut it short.
okay. I mean, go ahead, but I just want to make sure you know there's 2 people behind you and you had 2 minutes.
Okay.
Collectively.
Real quick, I hope you support this bill so that our family and other families don't have to go through these situations again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
The Arc of Virginia, we strongly support this bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Melissa Charnes-Gibson with the Disability Law Center. We support the bill. We think that it is very protective for students with disabilities and offers an opportunity to provide them with age-appropriate instruction. And thank you. I hope you'll support as well.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Mike Asip with the Virginia Council of Administrators of Special Education. We support the ideals of this bill. We have concerns around implementation of it in terms of the cost to divisions regarding family life education instruction. That's part of the bill. Those are the trained folks in general education who provide that instruction in sexual health. So we know that there are some costs involved in that down the road also. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Kathy Birch with the Virginia Education Association, and we support the bill.
Mr.
Delegate Russell.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that this bill passed last year, this subcommittee, and then the full committee went to the floor before being re-referred back here. It's good policy, and I would move that we report House Bill 1693. Last year was 1693. This year is 134.
There's a motion and a second to report. Members will record their vote. Let's find legislation reports 8-0.
Thank you.
See, I don't think it's necessary for you to make it the full. Delegate Samira, you have the balance of the time.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, members of the committee. I have a bill, House Bill number 40. There's an amendment in the nature of a substitute as well. I'm not sure if it was presented yet. I'll go ahead and
you keep on speaking. And
sure.
We'll come back to
understanding the mental. And this is the bill to ease out our understanding of mental health needs of our children by allowing them to give us their signals on their own of their needs. Children are only able to learn within a context of safety and security. In today's modern age, educators are often facing an intolerable burden trying to educate children who are disturbed, distracted, hyper-aroused, and whose behavior can often interfere with not only their own learning, but also the learning of others. This is particularly concerning because, according to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, 1 in 5 youth live with a mental health condition, but less than half of these individuals receive needed services. These inadequately treated mental health conditions can affect a student's ability to learn, grow, and develop. So I'm proposing creating a space in the educational facility where students are able to choose to use it so they can self-regulate and then come back to join the classroom refreshed. This will not only promote individual students' well-being, but the well-being of the classrooms and schools collectively. Some of these mental health break spaces are already being implemented in schools across the country with great success. We need to broaden the use of these spaces in schools across the state so all Virginian children have an equal opportunity to get back to a mental state that is conducive to learning. I also made some amendments to add that not just students are able to use the space, but also teachers and other school staff. We also made an amendment so that there becomes minimal fiscal impact, making it an issue guidance rather than a mandate as was previously in the bill. And we made sure that to address some concerns about isolation of students with mental health needs. And so we put in the bill voluntary use and that there's no place for seclusion or isolation of students in this mental health break space.
Members of the committee, questions for the patron?
I do, Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Cole.
I'm just trying to understand what you're trying to accomplish here. I mean, are you trying to make this local schools set up some kind of room or something where kids can go to if they're having issues, or that a teacher could send them to?
Sure. So we have many different types of mental health professionals at schools, and they, generally speaking, have spaces around them that they can accommodate students that need mental health care. There's a wide range of mental health care. You know, kind of what we're aiming for is to give a space for a student to ask the teacher, say, hey, I'm stressed out, I'm having difficulty focusing in class. There would be a policy in place that specifies the amount of time or whatever it may be that the school wants to specify, and the student can then optionally, keyword optional, to go to that space where that mental health professional may be very close by and just get a little break from class before they go back.
Delegate Cole.
So, all right, would this be at the volition of the child, or would the teacher be able to veto the request of the child? You know, I can just imagine there have been many times when I was in school where I was really stressed during a math test or something that I could say, hey, I think I need a mental health break.
That's very well understood. I think teachers know best, and the schools themselves know best as well. So that's why it's an issue of a guidance as to how they would set up their policy. That's a back and forth, I think, between administration and teachers as to exactly how that gets configured so that it's not abused, as many other school policies in place are done.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Delegate Van Valkenburg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The substitute gives me a lot less heartburn than the original bill. I guess it's two questions, so I'll ask one first. But
Delegate Van Valkenburg, take your time.
Sorry, I know. Sorry. One, how is this? Why is this necessary when we have school counselors in the school counselor office that has the space for that already? Mm-hmm. And then I guess and the second part to that is, all of our schools are already overcrowded. I already have, in a fairly affluent school district, we already have schools where teachers don't have classrooms because we don't have enough space. And then then there's another room that's gone. And so I guess I'm just wondering how we make, why is the school counselor office not enough? And then, and for shortness, just that. And then how are we going to make it?
Sure. So I'm going to try to remember you had three questions basically. So we do have mental health counselors. That's absolutely the case. Sometimes students don't want to see their mental health counselor. They just want to be on their own. They want to be given the space.
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Delegate Van Valkenburg.
But there would have to be somebody in that room that would have to be a mental health expert, wouldn't there?
Not necessarily, no. The point is that the Department of Education and the schools at this point would be able to figure that specific scenario out. But the idea is that the mental health counselor is just nearby, or it's near their office or the space that they've been using. And I hate to use specifically mental health counselors because there's a wide range of faculty that have mental health expertise. So I don't think that only one type of employee would be able to cover kind of the aspect that you're referring to. Number two, if the school doesn't have the space, unfortunately, I don't think this would be applied. So that's, again, kind of part of why we shifted away from a mandate to a guidance. And then, sorry, I'm not, that's it, okay.
So we have Delegate Mugler and then Delegate Avoli. Sure. And then I would like to leave some time for individuals wanting to speak in support or opposition. And just a reminder, we have 8 o'clock full committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Mugler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While this bill is really well intended, I think that there are some real fiscal implications and staffing consequences that would come along with this. And schools are, as Mr. Van Valkenburg, Delegate Van Valkenburg intimated, we're already strapped for space in our facilities as it is, and to dedicate another space for something different would be really difficult. And there are currently existing school counselors and psychologists available to our students. And so, I'd have some real problems with this. Again, you've moved this from a mandate to a little bit of a issue guidance, so that's a little bit better, but I do think that there are some real local implications for this proposal.
Thank you, Delegate Avoli.
Mr. Chair, very quickly, again, I go back to the autonomy of the local school board. And as you know, as a retired and recovering high school principal, I can't imagine administering this.
Sure.
Okay?
So,
you have another opportunity.
Yes, okay.
Individuals here to speak in support. And if I could ask you all to be
Mr.
brief,
Chairman.
2 minutes for 6 people.
Members of the committee, Kathy Birch of the Virginia Education Association. Virginia VEA members have spent a lot of time, particularly in this last year, talking about the mental health needs, not just of students, but staff in the buildings. We recognize the issues with the bill. Certainly, we think it's important for this issue to get a good hearing and to recognize that sometimes kids just need a space to de-escalate or to take a break. And and the expansiveness of mental health professionals in our schools, and I don't want to disagree with the delegate because we appreciate him putting a spotlight on this. We actually are lacking those positions in our schools. And so allowing a space where a teacher or a teacher's aide, if we have those, because we're also lacking those as well, giving them a place to de-escalate and have a minute to kind of get themselves back together and return to the classroom is important. So the VEA supports the legislation.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Noelia Rivera Calderon. I'm an attorney and policy advocate at the National Women's Law Center, and I also have experience as a middle school teacher and a school administrator. I'm here to support HB 40. The reality is that right now in Virginia, 1 out of 3 of all high school youth are persistently sad or hopeless to the point of being unable to do usual life activities. This is a crisis in Virginia and across the nation. In confronting this challenge, our greatest source of hope is our students. When we work with students, their number one request consistently is for mental health break spaces. We work with students from different schools, different states. This is consistently the number one thing that they want to make their schools more supportive, to the point that schools have counselors' offices where students can go. Some schools do have those resources, but the reality is that many do not. And HB 40 would address this equity issue by equalizing the amount of access to these very critical resources. So again, we urge support of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Tiffany Fink-Haynes. I'm here with the American Federation of Teachers in Virginia, and on behalf of our members, I'm here to urge you to support this bill. The number of students that have increased behavioral and emotional needs is increasing. Our members are finding that those needs just continue to increase, and the resources for students and teachers to address those needs hasn't increased with the need. In many cases, children report that schools are their primary mental health service provider, and so employees and students need additional resources to help provide those mental health supports. A number of our members have already incorporated mindfulness and trauma-informed practices into their classrooms and have found that by creating a space in their classrooms where they have for students to go take a break, de-escalate a situation, collect their thoughts has been really helpful. Sometimes having soothing music is a place where students are able to get the supports that they need and be able to come back and have greater success in student achievement. So we encourage you to support this bill.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Jim Council, representing Prince William Schools. Even in the present form, we oppose this bill.
And so we'll go ahead and start the time for those individuals that have opposition.
Right. Let me just say that Prince William's in the middle of a 10-year plan where we're opening a new school or completing a renovation and expansion of an existing school every year. And in spite of that, we still have children in trailer classrooms. So when I read this guidance, it talks about spaces. There's nothing that's going to protect us from a guidance that says, based on the number of pupils in a school, that there need to be numerous spaces. In addition to that, there are references in here to staff, so it contemplates additional staffing. For both of those reasons, Prince William opposes the bill. We see no indication in here that the state is prepared to help us with either the facilities or staffing costs. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Stacey Haney with the School Board Association. We also have concerns even with the amended bill. We have a mental health crisis. We are doing everything we can to address it. We have limited resources. The last speaker in favor of the bill spoke about resources and using resources. We have limited resources, and I would suggest that this, while it's well-intentioned, is not the highest and best use of those resources that we do have to address the mental health crisis. And so we would ask that you not support the legislation.
Chairman, members of the subcommittee, Tom Smith, Superintendent's Association, we're in opposition for the reasons stated.
Bev Lammy, Henrico Schools, and I just wanted to mention too that Delegate Van Valkenburg talked about our school counselors that can help with these situations. This is also one of those examples. If we had additional professional staff like school psychologists, some of those other folks, this would be the place to take them and let them work with that child at that particular moment of need. Thank you.
Is there a motion to move the substitute?
Move the substitute.
There's a motion and a second to move the substitute. All in favor express by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Delegate Samara.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, there's no fiscal impact. This bill has changed entirely from its original form to be $0 cost on schools. If they can't do it, they don't need to do it. If they don't have the staff, they don't need to staff. It's issues of guidance. It's if schools can, then they should. And it's not even a mandate. So if they don't even want to, even if they have the space, they don't need to. And this is just the beginning of a conversation between schools and Department of Education to figure out what they can do with no resources to solve a big problem. The idea of this bill is to remove the need for resources, to allow space for students to be given the opportunity to have a solution at their own hands rather than at the hands of a counselor. And we simply just want to be able to utilize as much of the minds of our school systems rather than the physical space or time to make this happen. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, move to report.
There's a motion
Second.
and a second to report.
The substitute.
There's a motion and a second to report the substitute. Members will record their votes. The motion, the report, it fails to report on a 5-3 vote. There's a motion to lay the bill on the table. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second to lay the bill on the table.
Chairman Bagby, if we could move it so that we can discuss it next year, that would be helpful.
There's a. I regret that it's no. Yeah, I regret that it's not debatable. It was seconded. Yes. A motion to lay the bill on the table fails on a 4-4 vote.
I can't correct it.
Mr. Chairman, can we move to pass by until, carry over until 2021?
There's a motion to carry over this HB 40 until 2021. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor of carrying it over to 2021, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Thank you so much. We will start the full committee in just a moment. We just need to change name tags and